Okay, so now in this video, let's try to work on search. So what we need to do, we need to make sure when we type in this box, we search this data and populate search results here. Now for that, there are a couple of approaches you can have. One approach you can just search with every keystroke. So every single key you type here, you can just call your spreadsheet application and get the results for that. And then as you keep typing, you can keep searching and getting results back. So this would be fine, but this would also be slow. So it's going to take time for it to go search and get the results back. It's a lot of calls to the server. So what I'm going to do, instead of doing that, I'm just going to load the data in a memory so I can quickly search through the data without having to give this constant calls to our server in the background. Now, for my data sample, I have about 6,000 rows. So let's get started. The first part is going to be to load the data into memory, which means we need some sort of function that will go grab the data from our spreadsheet and pull it as an array. What I'm going to do, I don't want to get every single column from my data. I only want to get the columns I'm going to need to use in the search functionality. The columns I'm going to need are the first and last names because those are the columns I'm going to be searching. And then I'm going to need the ID because that's the unique ID we're going to use to find which person that is. And for that reason, having the data laid out in this manner that the search columns follow the ID column in the beginning is probably a better idea than having all over the place. And then the rest of the columns could just follow on the right. So let's go ahead and get this function to get this data from here. So that means we're going to have to use a server-side function. Now, I don't want to put that in the same place where these load functions are, which you could, but I'm going to keep it separate. I'm just going to create another script here. Some name for this file. And then here, we're going to create a function. So the function that I'm going to do for this, I'm going to call getData for search. Now, what we need to do, we need to connect to our spreadsheet. And then we need to get to our worksheet. And the name for this is customers here. In this worksheet, we're going to get the range. And the range is going to start always from row 2, first column. The number of rows is going to be however many records we have. And we're going to get to it by getting the last row minus 1. Minus 1 because of the header. And I need 3 columns. I'm just getting first 3 columns here. And then to get this to an array, we're going to do get values. And that's pretty much it. We're just going to return this back. So that should do everything we need to do from the server side. I don't think we're going to need anything else. So now I want to call this function from our form and load that into memory so we can search the data. So let's copy that. I'm going to go back to let's close a lot of these things here. I'm going to keep main, search, and server-side functions. So I'll go to now main. At which point do we want to load this data? Well, if you think about this, when I open this, I click on this search, I open that search view. That's when we need to load that data, when we go to that search view. If you remember, we did make this callback functions that we can run after the view loads, which is going to help us here. But before we do the callback, let's first create the function. Or maybe I'll just call this set. So I need to call that backend function, which means we have to do our Google script run. And this is going to have a success handler. And that is going to get the return from this function, right? So this will be the actual data coming here. So I'll just do a function right in here as a callback and say data. That will be the return. Let's actually call it data returned. Now I want this data to be available globally. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go here, create that variable. So I'm not going to set it to anything, just declare it on top here. And then after we run this set data for search function, it's going to go grab that data from calling this function and return the data back. Now, when we get the data, we want to set this data to be whatever data is this. So we're going to take the data and we're going to make it equal to this return data, but we need to make a copy of this return data, because if you have arrays and you say data equals to data returned, it will just set a reference to this other array, which means it's basically just linking to that array. So if this later on changes, which it will, then our data will change as well. So we want that to be available globally, but this is going to be available for a very short period of time, and then it's going to be undefined. So for that reason, we're going to take this and use slice. So what slice usually does, you would usually give it at which point do you want to cut the array and get maybe 5 elements from it or 10 elements or something like that. But if you don't give it anything, it will just basically return the same array, but it's going to return a copy of it. So that way we can save that copy in this variable data globally in here. So that should be it. Now we need to make sure that this function runs in order for this to happen. And that needs to happen right after that search page loads. And where is that happening? Over here. So this is where we're going to use some of these other parameters we did, like the callback. And I'm going to say comma callback should be that function. So after this search view loads, we're going to do this. That's going to set the data. So now once we have the data, we need to be able to search through the data. So we're going to create a function for that. And how's the search going to work? So basically we're going to have this input box, which is in the search HTML. See this input box, and the ID is search input. So let's go grab that input box by its ID. And we don't need the box itself, we just need the value from the box, which means the text that's going to be typed in the box. Assuming this text is going to be something like John, we want to be able to search for John. So we're going to grab this text. Now, once we have the text, now we need to be able to go through our data, which is this array on top, and filter that to match this. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to take that data array and filter it. And this will accept a callback. And for each R, for each record, we need to return the rows that match a certain condition. So what condition we want to check? Now, for right now, let's just do a search by first name column. So that means we need to make sure that the second column, which is R1 with 0 index, equals to whatever the search criteria is. Now, that if we wanted this to be exactly equal to that. But we don't want this to be equal to that exactly. We want to make sure it contains that, because if I'm just typing J-O without the full John, I still want to be able to search. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this and I'm going to do index of, and inside of that, we're going to search for that search input. And if that is not equal to -1, we're going to know that we have a match. If it is -1, there's no match. So this is going to return a new array. And now, assuming everything we did here is right, we need to populate those results. So where are those going to go? They're going to go right here. So that's a part of that table that's right now populated with this random stuff that should not be here. So let's go and take that out of here and figure out how we're going to populate that instead. So I'm going to go to that search template. So this is that TR, that's the part that needs to populate for each result. I'm going to take that out of this T body, and instead I'm going to put it in a template. So that will basically make it invisible. So let's give something some IDs here. This template needs an ID. We need to make sure this T body, which should include all those rows, has an ID. So inside of this structure, I'm gonna give some identifiers to some of these. So for example, like this one, we don't need this filled up text. And here I'm not gonna do IDs because this row content is gonna repeat if we have multiple results, and IDs can only happen once on a page. So I'm gonna give this classes instead. So we'll do first name, last name. Now for our buttons here, for now we'll just leave it as is. This one needs an ID though. In this case, we're gonna use a class. All right, so the setup on this end is done, which means right now, because this is a template, if I go back and open this, see, there is nothing. Now what we are going to do, we need to go grab this search results box to put results in, and we need to grab this template to get this template out of here. So let's go back to our code and do that in our search function. So now once we have all of this, we're gonna take the results array and run a loop. So we'll just do for each loop on this. And for each result we get, we'll do our callback, and each row or record we're gonna call R. So the way we're going to use that, first, we need to go to this template box and get the template itself. So let's actually save that in a variable on top here. So now we'll have this variable template. So here first, with each result, we're gonna make a copy of that template. So we'll take this template, which will be the template content, and clone it to make a copy of it. Now, once we have a copy, that will basically be this inside part of that template. Now, in here, we need to change some things up. So I've just noticed I have this one. I need to remove that. But I have to basically now place customer ID in here, first name in here, and so on. And we're going to use those class names to do that. So I'm going to take that row and do a query selector. And this means we can actually find our elements basically inside of that template using CSS selectors. And customer ID class, so dot for the class. So I need to repeat this for all of the others. So once we find all of this, we're going to set the text content of each one of those. And for the first one, for customer ID, it's going to be whatever comes from our data from the first column. So that's this R, and the first column with JavaScript index is 0. And I need to repeat this for these other two columns too. So that's good. So once we set all this information, now we need to make sure we take that row that we just copied and put it inside of our results. So the results we get here, this search results box. So we're going to append a child to this. And that is going to be that row. Maybe I should call it TR. Let's do that. Let's call it TR. There are a lot of things we have to do still inside of this function, but overall idea is here now. Let's try to run this search function to see what happens. Now, to be able to run this, we need to run it when we type in this box, which means we need to listen to this box, and when you do some input, we need to run the function, which is our event listeners. Now, normally you would go here and do something like this. You would do this and find that element, which in this case would be the search input, and say every time there's an input, let's run the search function. Unfortunately, this is not really going to work because this code we have here on the page runs immediately when the page loads. And think about what happens when a page loads. When we just load this form, there is no search box. So it's going to try to find that search box and assign that event, but there's no search box to assign this to. Which means we need to assign our event to something that's already available here on our first page. So what's available on our first page? That's basically what's in this main HTML, right? So if I go here, what do we have here? All we have is this div, and we also have this div app. Now, if you think about it, everything we're adding here, we're adding inside of this div app. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to listen to all the changes inside of this div app and catch everything with that. You could also just listen to this entire thing, but I'm just going to pick this. I want to have less stuff in this, so I'm going to keep this contained inside of this app. So instead of doing what I was doing before, I'm just going to go here and say every time in that app there is an input, we want to run a function. But we don't want to run search because we could have other input boxes in here, in other places. That app appears on every single page, including, for example, like this one. We don't want that to work when we type in this box as well. So instead, we need to call another function that we're going to use to figure out which thing is being pressed or data is being entered, something like this. So I'm going to call it input event handler. And let's go ahead and create that function. And that function here is going to receive this parameter. We're going to call it E. That's a common convention. You can really call it anything you want. So that E will give you this target access. And that target means which element is currently being worked on, like clicked on or you run the input. Which element is that? So what we can do with this E target, we can check if that matches some pattern that we're trying to identify. So for example, we can do if that matches some sort of selector, what's the selector we need for our search box? This is that search input ID. Now this matches goes with CSS selectors. So we're going to have to do the pound key like this. So we'll just do an if statement here. So I'm going to do if this. So with this if statement, we'll see if the target element is this element. Then let's do something. And what's that something going to be is to run that search function that we've created on top here. Okay, so now with all of these in place, let's try to go back and see if all of this code we wrote is working, or maybe we made some mistakes. So I'm going to go back, save this, reload this, make sure to reload these things. Otherwise, you might be running older version of your code. I'll go to search. And I have this, I'm going to try to search something. So I'm not getting any results, not good news. So let's check our console to see if we get any errors. And we do. See, it says with success handler is not a function, so I didn't type that right. So let's go see where I made that mistake. Right there, when I was loading the data. All right. Handler, that's another mistake. All right, so now that this is fixed, hopefully, let's try this one more time. Okay, so now the row is not defined, which means now we get a problem in here someplace. And yeah, of course, remember how I changed this to TR? Now these are supposed to all be TRs. Stupid mistakes. I'm curious if I made any other mistakes like that here. Let's just quickly go through this. Oh, there it is. A panned child. I've misspelled that one too. Oh boy. Okay, let's go back and try this again. Finally. So that was David. Why do we still get Donna? And all of this. And too many results. Oh, so that's because it keeps populating with every keystroke. I can see what's happening here. So what's happening right now when I open this and I go to search, type D, see it's searching for all the results that have the letter D in them. And then as I type A, now it's searching for anything that has DA and adds to our current set of results. We want to make sure we clear the old set of results every time we run this search. Which means before we do all of this, we want to make sure we clear that search results box. So we're going to take that search results box right in here before we fill that up and just make it empty by doing inner HTML is nothing. Close this. Let's get back and do this again. Click on search. So that was good. Now, one other thing I want to do here, I want to make sure that this is not case sensitive, because right now it is, because index of is case sensitive. So let's make sure we convert this to non-case sensitive search. So I'm going to go back here, and right when we filter our data, which is going to happen right in here, instead of what I'm doing right now, we need to make sure that we're converting this R1 to lowercase and then also search input to lowercase. Let's do that. So I'm going to take that R1 and do something like toString and to lowercase. Should be a dot in here. And then the same I'm going to do to my search input. So this way both will be lowercase and it will basically act as not case sensitive. That's good. So this works. So far, we're just searching by the first name column. Now let's add functionality to also search the last name column. Now the way I want this to work, I want this to be like, if you go here, type like this, it basically should give us David Johnson or whatever we had. But I also want to be able to do this like this, type like Johnson, and then do like David and get my results. So I don't want this to be in a particular order when we search. So let's go back. So right now we're just searching by this first column. Let's first of all take care of the case when we just get the value from here. So if we have multiple words, we want to make sure we separate them by spaces so we can deal with it. And if for whatever reason they had like 3 spaces, we need to still do this correctly. And maybe there are some extra spaces before and after. We have to handle those too. So I'm going to first remove the spaces before and after, and then I'm going to split by all the spaces so I can get multiple words out of this. So that will be all with our search input right here. First of all, let's just do this. Instead of going later here and convert it to string and to lowercase, let's actually do it right here on top. After we get the value, let's just immediately do toString to lowercase, even though it's going to be toString anyways, because that's how HTML values come back. But let's put that in there anyways. And for now, I'm just going to remove this. But what I'm going to do now, I'm going to do search words variable. And the way I'm going to set it is by taking the search input and splitting that by spaces. Before I do that, I also want to make sure I trim this text from white spaces before and after. So now that we took care of that, let's go ahead and split this by the space. Now, if you did this, then it would split by a single space. So that's why I'm going to use regular expression here. And I'm going to do S plus, meaning one or more space. So this will be an array now of those multiple words that were separated by spaces. So when we have multiple words, we need to make sure that all of those words appear in the search term. So that means that would be an AND condition. Now, when we're searching those multiple words in multiple columns, so if it's available in at least one of the columns, then it's okay. So that would be an OR. So it's an AND overall with an OR inside. All right. So with that in mind, let's just push this thing down a little bit and do that. So we're going to take all of these words And we need an and condition for all of those words. So that would be our every method in JavaScript, and that will accept a callback function. And for each word in this, we need to search them in all of the columns in our data. Or actually not all of the columns we actually care about. So assuming we want to search in second and third column, that would be 1 and 2. So again, 0, 1, 2. So 1 first name, 2 last name. So we'll do an array of 1 and 2. In this array, we need to make sure it appears in at least one of the columns. So this is our sum statement. That's our OR condition. So we'll do a function here. Again, a callback. And those columns are coming from this row on top. So we're going to take that row, and this will be the call index. Let's call it that, the column index. So we're going to take that, not search words, but the R right here. And in that row, we're going to grab the column index. So the first time is going to be the first column and then the second column, right? So we're going to take that. This is what we do here. See, we do this R1 toString. So basically, it's this line right here. But instead of this 1, it will be this toString, to lowercase, all of this. And instead of this search input now, it's going to be the word we're searching. Now, this is not needed anymore. I think I got this right. Now, I need to make sure I return all these things. So if I did this logic right, this should work. This should go through every row, search for all the words from here. If the word appears in one of the columns, that should return. Now let's put this in a variable, actually. Keep this separate. We don't have to do that, but let's do it. So we'll do var search columns equals to this. And then we'll just use that in here. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Now let's see how many mistakes I did in this. So I'm going to save this and test this. So let's go back, close this, reopen this, go to search, and let's try to search. What do we have back in here? So let's do Julia Hansen. So if I do Julia, we already got an error. Let's see what's going on. There is no error. That's even worse, I guess. Let's go check. Oh, of course, I forgot one of the returns. Return this, return this, return this. Too many of these. It's crazy in here. All right, save it. Let's go back and try this again. Okay, one more try on this. So Julia, so far so good. Now if I do Hansen. All right, so that works. Now let's try the opposite. Hansen, it looks like this is working. Good. I think we got our search functionality going. Now the only thing I want to make sure, that's actually a problem here. See, when I clear the search box, it pulls all the results. So we don't want to get these results when there's nothing in here. So let's take care of that. So we'll just do a little condition here. See this results array. So instead of just automatically going and filtering this, let's make sure that this input has something in it. So that means we're going to do it right here. I'm going to say if that search input equals to blank, then we want to do this as an empty array. So we're going to return nothing. Otherwise, we're going to do the filter we used to do. I think that should take care of this entire thing. Let's go back and reload this. Go to search, and I think we should be done. Very nice. So now we have a nice search box here. Very good. So search is working. That's fine. So the next video will concentrate on deleting some of these records. So what I want to do when we search and get these results, I want to make sure we have this delete button So when we click on this, it deletes that record from our data. But for this video, that should be plenty. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.